Hello everyone, welcome back to the Away Sit on the Gallagher Chats Network. The winter transfer window's coming to an end and Newcastle United have made some decent moves. And as we come to the final third of the season, we'll be looking to kick on because we still are at risk of potentially sneaking back into the relegation places because we like to make it hard for ourselves. Next challenge is a game that we'll be looking to win, but the games that we should win this year we haven't, and the games that we shouldn't have won we have. And that team coming up against us this time is Norwich, a team that absolutely demolished us at the start of the season. And someone who predicted it is Tom from Along Come Norwich, who's with us again today. Thanks for coming on.
You're very welcome.
So earlier in the season, you said that staying up would be nice, but it wasn't exactly the main priority. The main thing for Norwich fans was to keep playing the attacking style of football, attractive football, keep the Norwich identity, which you've built up in the Championship. Is that still the case now when you're 6 points adrift? Or
Yeah, 100%. I mean, and we've done exactly that. You can't turn compliments into points. We've attracted some nice words. Danny Murphy on Match of the Day during the FA Cup round, which obviously both teams were talking about tonight, did well in. Said we were the best looking bottom of the league team he's ever seen, and there's a certain kind of pride in that. We knew as when we spoke early in the season, we haven't got any money. Like we're not in the same realms. I mean, you refer to yourself as Newcastle United. We can't afford the wages of Danny Rose. We can't afford the wages of that. We just don't have that kind of backing. We're completely self-funded, and if it hasn't come through merchandise, ticket sales, and commercial things the club have done, we simply can't afford to bring the players in. So we always knew it was going to be a massive struggle, and we played such nice football for the preceding kind of 18 months. The important thing for us was to not do a Pulis and just shit ourselves and try and stay up best we can. And instead what we've done is we've taken the game to teams, and we've turned a naivety doing that to actually being in most games most of the time. You know, we've been put away 2 or 3 times this season. A couple of times against Manchester United, weirdly, when they're not as good as they normally are. But you know, in the games against Tottenham, and in the other games, Chelsea, we lost narrowly 3-2. Tottenham, we were equal with for most of the game. Lost like something like 88th minute or something in midweek the other day. You know, we've been in and around all of the games. The fine margins have just been too much for us.
Yeah, I think when you've got results, they seem to just be big games where you've turned up in. I think obviously start of the season beating us must have been massive. The Man City game, which was just mental. No one saw that coming in a million years.
Superb. Yeah.
Then I saw that you got draws against Spurs, Leicester and Arsenal. Is
Yeah.
it frustrating where you turn up in these big games and then you can't put Bournemouth away or put Villa away? Is it frustrating, or do you just have to take that with the wins?
To be fair, it is. We haven't our performance levels haven't really differed. Like the results look a bit like we've turned up in the big games, but actually what's happened is those marginal fine margins and the bad luck and the being punished for mistakes ironically hasn't happened against the better teams. So when we beat City at home, one of the greatest league performances I've ever seen from 11 yellow shirts for 90 minutes. Sterling and Aguero missed first half chances that if they put them away, both not sitters but goals you expect those players of that
I seem
quality
to remember
to
them
score.
gifting you a goal as well, didn't they? Did the keeper throw one?
They switched off in the second half, but you know we were in that game and it was a really tight game. But that was an example of we didn't get punished in that game, and you know we just beaten Bournemouth 1-0. They did actually miss 2 sitters, and so really should deserved on chances or easy chances to get a point, even though there was only really one team in it. It was nearly 70% possession for Norwich that game. But loads of others, like you mentioned, Villa. You know, we've had 2 defeats against Villa, when there's been nothing between the teams in terms of possession, quality, time on the ball, chances created. You know, they had 5 shots and scored 5 goals at Carrow Road earlier this season, and for the first hour, it looked like it was only going to be one winner. You know, we were I think 2-1 down and playing all the football. It's just we haven't got enough depth in the squad to bring players on and kill games. So I think we've thrown away 7 winning positions this season, which shows one, we've not quite got the quality it looks like to stay up, although we're far from mathematically down. We're only two and a bit games adrift. That's nothing with over 10 games left. And 2, although I do think on balance we'll go down. And 2, it shows that there's been 7 games where we've been winning and not winning. In the first minute at half time we've been winning most of these games, or 7 of these games we've been winning. So it just shows that we're good enough at this level, just about, but what we don't have is that reserve of that last 20 minutes to bring on that third really good striker or that fourth really good midfielder. You know, we've got just about enough for a Premier League 11, and that's about it. And that means that 3 or 4 of those lads need to be having one of the best games of their career to be at that level. And that's just the wages we can afford to pay.
Yeah, I think that's probably clear to see when you watch Norwich week in week out. You play great football. You've got 1 or 2 brilliant players. I mean, Todd Cantwell, I don't think anyone knew who he was before this season, and he's been absolutely smashing it. Buendia as well looks really good, and it looks like he's had big clubs sniffing around him. Pookie, which we obviously know all about, seems to have gone through 2 massive purple patches and then a bit of a blank, but looks just like a great striker. Have you made any improvements in January?
We've made we've added a couple of players in. Duda, who is a Slovakian international, who you might recognise because Slovakia have played England a few times recently. He's a decent number 10, and he genuinely does seem to have been an improvement. He's only on loan. And he is just out of it. I think it's Hertha Berlin he's come from. He's been playing Bundesliga football, and he's a proper one-touch merchant. Like we were joking in his debut, was the win against Bournemouth. It was almost like he'd been told by the lads before the game, oh, by the way, in the Premier League you're only allowed 1 touch. Like that's the rule. Like, literally he'd had the ball 18 times and he'd had 18 touches. He looked like a fantastic player, and he has fit in immediately, which you don't often see with loan signings. The other lad we've brought in is Lucas Rupp, who is a permanent, and the thinking with that is he's probably been brought in for a potential championship season next year. He's another one of those low risk, high reward players. He's gone straight into the side and looks, comfortable, but by no means have we added a player who you think is suddenly rocketed us up in terms of ability to turn a game.
And if you did go down, do you think you would lose any of that current squad?
We would cash in. That's the model. That's the only way we can survive. We can't do what a Newcastle and other teams have done, West Ham, and keep loads of a Premier League squad. And I remember that the Newcastle squad with Shelvey, etc. in it, just looked ridiculous in the Championship.
Yeah, in the Championship it was ridiculous.
It was just like, well, hang on, this is insane. It was like an FA Cup game every week. But I remember that Newcastle team at Carrow playing really well. But we will keep several. Obviously, the parachute payment will help us keep a few of them. But some of the younger lads, Ben Godfrey is worth an awful lot of money. Max Aarons is worth an awful lot of money. Cantwell will probably get a few bids for because he scored the goals. But I actually think that he's probably got the most potential growth of the young lot. I think he could do another season of kicking on personally, because he hardly played last year. He was on the fringes of things. He wasn't part of our title winning. He didn't score loads of key goals, or he's not part of loads of the celebrations that you'll see on the highlights reel of our championship winning season. He really was on the fringes of things, and then this season he's kicked on a level. So for me, I think that he's a bit like Maddison. Maddison had a real highlight reel season. We waited, and then he had an even better season, and then we got the 20 odd million for him. I think Cantwell might be in a similar boat, but the likes of Aarons and Godfrey, I think we probably will cash in on and get tens of millions for them, because they're young, under 21 internationals, and they've now got nearly a season's worth of Premier League experience. But we are not down. It's look at Southampton's run. Watford won 3 or 4 on the bounce. A run of 3 or 4 games together, and all of a sudden we're within a point or two.
Well, I wrote off both of those teams because they just looked abysmal. And I think the difference with you guys is you don't necessarily look abysmal.
No, unless you watch the Man United games. In both Man United games, we looked like Swindon or Derby, like one of those awful Premier League teams who don't deserve to belong there. Didn't lay a glove on them, gave them too much respect. But in genuinely nearly all of the game, and I get jip on our podcast for being more of the cynical, pessimistic style fan. This is probably the best football we've played in the Premier League, including when we finished third, and including those times in the early 90s when we were one of the better teams for the first 2 or 3 years of the Premier League, playing in Europe and all the rest of it. Some of the football we play this season has been an extension of what we did last year. It's been fantastic to watch, but unfortunately we're watching it whilst we're 2-1 down. And there's been so many moments where Sam Byram, who's been a bargain, 750 grand, and he's now played the most games of a left back in this season. He's now played more games than Lewis, who he's kind of replaced. He's done brilliantly since he came in from West Ham, But he's had 2 opportunities late in games to either get us a win or get us a draw. And he's a left back. He's arriving at the back post. You can't really hold it against him. But they're 2 obvious things you point to, and all of a sudden we're 4 points better off, and we're within a win of getting out of the bottom 3. So it's fine margins in the Premier League. It sounds corny, but we just genuinely need a bit of luck. If we can just have a lucky 2 or 3 games on a bounce to just get us within touching distance, it is possible. Although I do think, on balance, it's a bit too much of an ask.
Well, I think the game at the weekend's a massive opportunity for you guys to start making up ground. Obviously, alluded to the earlier game in the season, I went down to Norwich. It was one of the worst performances I've ever seen, and I wish I'd never bothered. I just seem to remember you just breaking our lines constantly. We couldn't get the ball off you. Pookie obviously just put away every chance. What's your memory of that game? How do you think you can replicate that in the game at St James's at the weekend?
Well, I actually think that Duda, who we talked about before, watch out for his first time balls for Pookie off the back shoulder, because that was something that Newcastle couldn't live with. And I remember thinking after the game, they should have watched our video catch up, because I told you on that podcast about him on the last shoulder as the midfielder gets the ball. Watch that he makes the run just before the ball comes to him, and that was exactly how he scored 2 of his 3 goals against Newcastle. And Duda is one who will play the ball early. Buendia is in probably the richest vein of form of a Norwich midfielder for a very, very long time. And he's second statistically only to De Bruyne this season in the Premier League for chances created and successful passes, etc. Which just goes to show, if we maybe could afford 2 strikers of Pookie, or a Pookie and a half, we probably wouldn't be in the bottom 3. We are creating chances. That has not been a problem for us at all. It's just taking them. I honestly think we've got a very good chance of coming away with 3 points, if not 1, because the one thing this team doesn't do, they play with no fear. They will play attractive football no matter what the score is. They will play patient football. So I'm confident that. We've also won 2 of the last 3. One being in the FA Cup, but it was a Premier League team. We knocked out a Premier League team, so we've won 2 games in the last three. So I think it will be a good game. And what with you making a couple of loan signings, I would think that your place will be jumping. What's happening with the takeover? Is that anywhere nearer to being done?
That was actually going to be my last. I was going to ask you for a yes or no answer as to whether you think it's going to happen.
Okay.
Obviously we've been bitten. Feels like millions of times about takeovers. They always seem to come around either season ticket renewal times or transfer windows as a bit of a smokescreen. It's weird, and they've said that we should have had a resolution to this by the end of the transfer window, which again is convenient timing. I do genuinely think we've had interest for the club. The issue you've got is we get a lot of chances to try and buy us, like the first Amanda Staveley bid, where they didn't have enough money, and then we had this new Emirate group, the BZG group, who claimed that they tried to buy Liverpool a while ago, and they said they had the money and that it was all agreed and everything like that, but it turns out they were just waste of space as well. This one does feel a bit different, because Ashley always said you won't hear about the takeover in the news, and then it'll take months and months and months. It'll just happen and it'll be announced. And I'm a solicitor myself. I deal with these sorts of transactions. You're not allowed to talk about it. So there's no reason it would ever really get out unless the parties, unless there was some sort of leak or, it was deliberate. So is it going to happen? It's 50-50 for me. You just never know with these things. You do checks on the company, you do checks on all the debts and everything like that. There's definitely skeletons in the closet of the club and with Mike Ashley, so it could well be that we've had 3 or 4 willing buyers come along and they've just looked at the books of the club and gone, do you know what, I don't want to touch this with a barge pole. So I do think it's Ashley. He wants someone to come and pay over the odds. He wants someone to put down £350 million in cash immediately, which not many people can do. Even Mike Ashley himself wouldn't be able to do that. But this new person is allegedly got £1 trillion royal fund behind him, probably fueled by murder and all sorts of horrible things. But I think we just don't know. Obviously, we can dream about it.
Therein lies where I come down on this sort of thing. And there's we were talking before press and record about our podcast, Along Come Norwich, and Along Come Norwich podcast came out of the fan group that creates all the banners and the flags and the crowdfunding for the atmosphere at the ground. And we all agree, and we are called pointless vermin and scum and the fans of the club and all the rest of it. But we all do agree that it's better the devil you know. And Delia and Michael, our majority joint shareholders, they can't pump in. They've got a few million, which is more than you and I have got, even on a solicitor's wage. It's more than we've got. But a few million is like one player's wages for a year, not even the fee. We just cannot compete in that way. And there are some Norwich fans who are desperate for us to sell up to anyone. But you mentioned it there, murder, corruption, oil. I like the identity that we have, which is kind of that we can't quite afford to be in the big boys. We are in the top 26 biggest clubs in the country in terms of support, and statistically we're always either in the Prem or nearly in the Prem. Like, other than that one mental thing, we went down to League One and were brought back up again, and we did that obviously consecutively. Other than that, we've been there or thereabouts for about 35 years now. We've been roughly in the top 26 clubs in the country, and that means that sometimes we'll be at the table and sometimes we'll be at the kiddies table, like next door to it, and that's kind of our identity. And the reason I'm saying that is because I almost feel as a neutral fan when it comes to Newcastle, I will miss there not being like a clown car operation running the club. Like, it's how long has actually been? Was it 12, 14 years now?
2008, I believe it was.
Okay, so about 12, 13 years. What I guess. But that's who you are. Like that's so now that's kind of the Newcastle fan experience, and therefore the kind of reference. Like, and Newcastle have got reputation as fans for being almost blindly passionate and voicing their opinion and not necessarily getting heard. So part of me is really interested to see what the next chapter might bring. But other than my only kind of note of caution for those that say, look, sell up at any cost, etc. You don't know what you're going to get. That there are more examples of takeovers that look at the league position in 3 or 4 years' time. Would they have said yes with hindsight? Than there are.
Yeah, it is a tricky one.
That end up with Leicester.
Yeah, the grass isn't always greener. I mean, the grass we're currently on is bleak.
And
very brown. Very, very brown. It is a difficult one. Obviously, I think a lot of people forget this, but the reason Mike actually bought the club, obviously he did it as an investment, but the reason we had to sell was because they'd racked up so much debt. The club was badly run. And Mike actually came in and he didn't quite clear the debt. He transferred it to different companies and things like this, but he did put us on a solid footing, and we're never going to go bankrupt under Mike Ashley. You know that, and you've seen the horror stories. We were talking to Oxford fan last week about Bury and clubs like that, where you think, bloody hell, it could be a lot worse. I just think a lot of our fans a lot of us are just bored, or we're just completely detached from the club. You've got season ticket holders of 40 plus years saying, I don't want to go anymore because it's just pointless. Why should I try, when we've got an owner who is one of the top 20 richest people in the country and he just doesn't care? I think it's difficult because obviously I know with the Man City owner, obviously it's not the same nation and things like that, but same part of the world, same sort of owner. I know that he has actually done quite a lot in the community as well, and brought a bit of a buzz, and he hasn't just pumped money in and not done anything else. So yeah, it is difficult. And would I be entirely comfortable with having an owner who has allegedly had journalists killed and done all sorts of horrible things? It's like, well, Mike Ashley's not a saint either, but it does leave a bit of a sour taste.
Ashley would have definitely done that if he thought he could.
We don't know. He hasn't murdered anyone. Yeah, it is a really difficult one, and I think a lot of our fans will just see the footballing side of it. We're getting a new owner. Do you know what? If he comes in and he pumps loads of money into the club, a lot of our fans will probably say, I don't care how many people he kills if we sign Kylian Mbappe and he's smashing them in front of the Gallagher. It'd leave a bit of a sour taste with me, but I think the football comes first. You give them a chance. If they are really horrible and you think, do you know what, this wasn't worth it, you never know, do you? It is a really difficult one. I could go on and on about it, but I really hope it happens. I'm at that age where I've only ever really known the later sort of Bobby Robson years, and then Mike Ashley. So I've never seen us in a cup final. Don't really remember us in the Champions League a lot. I remember us playing in the Europa League under Alan Pardew, which was an absolute delight. It would just be nice to try something new, even if it wasn't someone like a massive trillionaire like this bloke is, someone who sees us as Newcastle United and not just a branch of his own business. And I think that's the main thing for our club, because I spoke to Man United fan before we played them, and they get a lot of grief about the way they criticise the Glazers and Ed Woodward, and people say you've
Yeah.
chucked in hundreds of millions of pounds. How can you complain? And they say similar things to Newcastle fans, really, which is we're buying players to sell shirts, we're buying players to build the corporate brand of Manchester United instead of just
To
building a
keep being
football
the
team.
richest club in the world rather
Yeah,
than
and you can
being a
understand it a
competitive
little
club.
bit. Obviously, it's completely different levels to Newcastle and then Norwich as well. And I think that's it with Newcastle. I appreciate that we're in a lot better position than a lot of clubs are. But when you look at it, you go, this man does not care about football. He's not a footballing man. He just wants to make as much money as humanly possible, rip the heart out of the club. Um, he's asset stripping the club. The most recent thing he's done, just to give you one example, the Strawberry Place, which is the bit of land behind the Gallagher stand, which is basically the whole view of this. You can always see St James's Park from the city, and it's basically because of that view. He's flogged that off to a company where him and his brother have got a stake in it, I think, and they're going to develop it all, build big high rises, and then flog it. So
That
he's
sounds
like the
really
stake.
above board.
Yeah, so he's basically said, well, I've sold it for £7 million. I've made the club £7 million, and it's going to become a £300 million development, and they're going to sell it on. And you just think you
Mm.
just don't care. And I mean, the council hasn't helped with things like that. But yeah, I really hope the takeover is going to happen. It's all under wraps. Journalists are saying completely different things. At the end of the day, no one has a clue. But just to wrap it up, the difference with this one, I think, is that the a news site that broke it was the Wall Street Journal this time
Okay.
around, which
Okay.
you think doesn't get much more reliable than that. Whereas last time it was just one Sun journalist who broke it because he's
Doesn't
got
get
mates in
less
the
reliable than that.
exactly. So you do get these little drips of information where you start to build your optimism up again. But I'm trying not to get my hopes because we've been bitten too many times. But yeah, under Mike Ashley, made a few transfers. Team's pretty horrible, but we seem to pick up results game on game, and you start to think we're two-thirds through the season. Is this a fluke, or are we genuinely okay somehow? Just quickly, what have you made of Newcastle this year? Do you think we've made good transfers? Do you think we'll stay up?
It's too early to tell. I think the win against Chelsea. There's been some signs of life recently. Obviously, that you think you can probably build on and kick on with, but then you don't have to look very far back into the results I was looking at before until you see a couple of things where you think, well, as you mentioned, they're games that they really should have picked up points with. I think Newcastle are in that bottom 10, 11, including Saints. Really, yes, Saints have been on an incredible run. Would anyone be genuinely surprised if they lost 6 on the bounce? No. I think that bottom 11 or 12 teams, there's 3 going down from that. I think Watford, Norwich, and Bournemouth are currently the 3 that I know it's easy to say that because they're down there. I think
Hmm.
they probably will be the 3 that go eventually, but I also wouldn't be surprised at all if a team that's currently in 10th or 11th does end up needing something on the last day of the season to stay up. It is that tight.
Yeah, I'd put you in. I'd put you in the bottom 3 still. I think Bournemouth as well. I've been saying they would go down for years and years and years,
They were
and they
dreadful. We
somehow
had them
just
we had 2 Saturdays ago. They were awful. They were
they've
so
been
bad.
awful. They've been awful all season. I know Callum Wilson hasn't scored for something like 9, 10 games, or has only scored 1 goal in that
Yeah,
time.
no,
Something like
but
that. They're just
he had his first shot on target against us since October.
yeah, that's just unheard of. You think of Bournemouth as being quite an attacking good side, similar to what you'd think of Norwich, but they're just not that. So I'd put you two down there, and I thought we would go down at the start of the season. I don't think we will now. I think we've shown that we can fluke enough points, and I think we've made good transfers. We do have good players. We just, for some reason, just can't keep the ball. I don't know if it's Bruce's tactics or nerves or whatever. We just can't control the game. So I think with this game, it's
That
going to
could
be
be a
similar to what
problem on
they're always
Saturday.
like.
That could be
It's
a
going to,
problem on Saturday
yeah,
because
it's
we want the ball all the time, and the teams that we struggle against are the ones who will give us the ball rather than can't hold on to the ball. If you see what I
mhm.
mean, the ones who are super defensive, we struggle sometimes to break down. But we're away from home, and any away point against in the Premier League is crucial. I'm
Mhm.
hopeful of a score draw, and if we're in, if the wind blows in the right direction, you never know. We might just
Yeah.
nick a win, but I think we'll be coming home with at least a point on Saturday.
Oh, fair enough. Well, we'll be 5 at the back, hard to break down, but you will have the lion's share of possession again, even though we should be having more possession at home, but we just can't. We just can't do it. I don't know why. Maybe these new signs will make a difference. I don't think they personally will in terms of possession. We'll be good on the break. Um, I think it's going to be a dull game, weirdly. I think it's going to be a lot of you with the ball, passing it side to side, trying to break the lines, but we'll just stand there. But I fancy us to nick it 1-0. That's my personal prediction. But I like Norwich. I do hope you guys stay up because you do play good football. And I hate the teams who get promoted and then just stick 11 men behind the ball and hope for the best. Because what's the point of getting promoted if you're not going to have a go?
100%. That's exactly what we didn't want to do. And we will go down playing lovely stuff if we go down. And we'll stay up playing lovely stuff if we stay up. But the important thing is we really do seem to have a culture now. This is third season in a row of playing, a very identifiable style. And there's something nice in that. There's something nice in everyone. The more teams that watch us, the more away fans and home fans that we go to play in front of, going, actually, yeah, that's some of the nicest stuff we've seen someone play. Thanks for the 3 points that we got against you. But whilst we beat you,
what a
we
lovely
played some
game.
nice stuff. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. I think that's probably a fair place to leave it. I will ask you the question again. One word: is our takeover going to happen from someone who has no vested interest in it whatsoever?
No.
Okay. I mean, you could have said yes, but that's fine. But anyway, right. We'll leave it there. Thanks very much for coming on again. All the best
Cheers,
for
Andy.
Saturday, and hopefully you're leaving with no points.
Okay, cheers, mate. Take care now.
Thanks.
Thanks, bye.